So today's video is all about looking at the differences in the golf swing between the professionals, the really elite golfers, and the amateurs who would aspire to play like those professionals. We're going to discuss what I see as one of the most important differences and a drill that can help you work on it. So the biggest difference between the world's best and the amateur golfers are the scores that they shoot. The best players shoot in the 60s and the high handicap golfers shoot around the hundreds. But what do they do in their golf swings to enable them to do that? That's exactly what we're going to talk about in this particular video. So the lesson plan today is to discuss the movement that we're covering, and then to give you two drills that you can use in practice to give you a better sensation and a better feel as to potentially what it might be like to have a golf swing like one of the world's best. Now, we're actually tackling a relatively complicated subject here, but we're going to try and make it super simple. So the terms that I use are potentially not going to be the most accurate ones, but they're going to help us in understanding this message and getting this information across to you in the best possible way. So we need to understand a couple of little key terms before we progress. We need to first of all understand what we mean by the centre of mass of the golf club. We're going to call it balance point. Very simply, every single golf club that you've got has got a balance point. You can find it just by putting your finger somewhere under the club shaft and it will obviously balance. So it's going to be, much closer to the club head, but it's going to be somewhere around about here, so maybe 8 inches from the club head, and that's the balance point. So we need to reference that in the video. We're going to call that the balance point. Now we also need to have an understanding of something called hand path. So we're going to assume we've made a backswing, and the hand path is the direction that the hands are moving as they start down. So as you can imagine, if I did this, that would be a very different hand path to if I did this and I did this. Every golfer's got one. Some are good, some are not so good, but everyone's hands move in a certain direction. So what do the best players in the world tend to do? There are obviously examples of golfers who play these games to a super high level who don't do this, but on the whole, what do they tend to do? Well, at some point in the early downswing, so that's just after the club's finished its backswing, at some point in the early downswing, the centre of mass, or that balance point of the golf club, is lower than the direction that the hands are travelling in. So if I made this movement down here, hopefully you can see I've extended the hand path, and you can see how the weight or the balance point of that golf club is below it, or behind it, however you want to term that. Now, how do they do this? Well, there's multiple different ways of doing it, and some of them you'll see have a golf swing which looks like this, and they'll drop that club behind the hands. Some of them will have a very neutral backswing and it will have a very slight shallowing motion, but it's still behind. Some of them will actually have the club a little bit laid off at the top, and as they start down, it's already behind. But there's a very, very strong trend to say that the best golfers in the world, early in the downswing, have the balance point of the golf club lower or behind the direction that the hands are moving in. Now, I'm sure you can appreciate where we're going with this. What do we tend to see from the golfers who struggle? Well, they have the opposite. So as they transition, as they are in their early downswing, we tend to have the hands moving on a certain path, but the centre of mass, or that balance point, is in front of or above that line, however you want to term that. So if I make this move and I start with my hands down, we start to see that difference. And this is very, very evident. And I would say this is probably one of the biggest faults that we see in the amateur game. Now, why this happens, we could do a complete series on that. It can be to do with the trail arm. It can be to do with them throwing the shoulders over. There can be numerous reasons why a golfer does that. We're specifically looking at actually what it creates, and that's what it tends to create. As soon as we get that balance point, the wrong side of the hands in the downswing, we are recovering that golf club. We are going to be swinging it left, or we're going to be doing certain things with our body and our arms to try and recover it. And whilst we can make some decent attempts at hitting the golf ball, and we often get decent results, it's not going to be consistent, and you're certainly not going to be an elite golfer in the world of golf. So a couple of drills that you can do, and we're going to start off with this one here. You're going to take an alignment stick, and many of you should have these. If you haven't, something similar would be absolutely fine. And you're going to place this around about onto the golf club, and so the extended end is kind of below the grip. Now, as I make a backswing, I will have a direction that my hands are moving in, and I can roughly, as I'm practicing, I can roughly have an idea what that would be like. I can see very clearly how this would be pointing behind. I know that that's not exactly what I want to do. So what I'm really trying to do here is, in transition, I'm trying to see that alignment stick, and I'm trying to point it more in front of my lead arm and trying to get to point in the ground over there somewhere. Exactly where and how much, that's not important at this stage. We're just looking to try and change that. Now, as I do that, I want to try and start to add a little bit of flow to that. So I want to start and make this move and start to feel like there's a little bit more flow to it as opposed to a posed position. The posed position is absolutely fine early on as you're starting to understand what you're trying to do, but we need to move that to a flowing motion fairly early. So we're up and it's there, and then we can start to work through, and you can hit a couple of shots doing that. Stick might hit you on the left hand side, don't worry too much about that. It's more a case of can we get that transition happening. The second little exercise, and this is by far more difficult to hit golf shots. I'm going to have an attempt here. This could be an air shot on YouTube. And this one is one we just create a very different sensation in transition, but we're just looking to get a sensation of what it's like to have the weight in a different place relative to the hands. So you're going to take your address up to the top, and it doesn't have to be a completely full backswing, and you're just going to take your trail hand off. So I'm leaving my glove hand on, and if I was to completely relax my left hand, the club would want to drop this way. Okay, so if I'm keeping my arm in place, but I'm just letting the club drop, it wants to do this. So what I'm going to do from here is I'm going to relax that grip to feel like the club head just drops a little bit. Once it's dropped a little bit, I'm going to rotate and attempt to collect the ball at the bottom. This is not easy. So let me show you what that should look like. Fingers crossed I make contact here. So we're just letting that club drop, and then we go through right off the toe, and it went into the right hand side of the net, but it hit the net. Okay, let me try it once again, but hopefully you can see as I do that, you can see how that the balance point of that golf club is starting to drop somewhere different. That was a much better shot, somewhere different relative to my hands. Now, if you don't do this, that drill will be incredibly different, incredibly difficult, and quite eye-opening. What you should find is actually it feels quite natural to sort of sense that, and then how would I stop that club dropping too far behind me? Well, I'd start to really initiate my rotation. So any of you who feel like you under-rotate, you don't get open enough, this is a great drill for you, because you're going to feel and sense as that club drops that you really want to rotate your body to get that club head being pulled more in front of you, which is exactly what we need you to try and feel and sense. Ultimately, what I could do is I could put a combination of those two drills together and try and hit a golf ball which maybe would go 40 to 50 yards. We would go up, I would feel it, and then go through. Now, hopefully, I need to look back at this, these movements I'm making are quite pronounced, and they don't need to be that pronounced. They just need to be subtle. There are examples of golfers that have quite pronounced movements. They don't need to be like that. What we're really trying to avoid here is those golfers who have this movement in the top of their golf swing where that club gets very much in front of it. We're just trying to soften that off a little bit, take some of that out. We don't have to have a Sergio look to our golf swing. We would just like to have that in the rehearsals and the drills. Now, this is definitely something that I'm working on at the moment in my golf swing. So let's see if I can get anywhere near to what I'm actually trying to do. Up to the top, feel is this. Let's see if I can get anywhere near. Need to look back at that. Felt different, but I need to look back at it and see how close I got. So the difference, one of the biggest differences between the amateur golfers and the professionals, the elite golfers, is where they get the balance point of the golf to the center of mass, what you feel, where they get that relative to the direction that the hands are moving. If you can get this better, if you can improve this, it can unlock so many good things down at impact, and it can unlock some better golf for you as long as you can start to control it and you can take it to the practice area before you try it on the golf course. Thanks for watching. Usual stuff is down below, comments box down there, like button. Would love to hear your thoughts. Would love you to hit that like if you did like the video, and also would love you to hit that subscribe button if you're not a subscriber. It is absolutely free. Would love you to be part of the community. I really believe these videos can help you play your best golf. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here again soon.